Hey, look, man, I'm 43 years old. I'm a CEO of a private equity owned company right now. I've worked my tail off during my career to get where I am, but I've got 3 young boys, and that's a question that's top of mind for me and my wife at all times, right? But prior to that, look, it was 2 things, man. I don't think it's rocket science. It's hard work, right? Every day, one of my mentors, former leaders, former CEO would say, how do you sharpen the saw every single day? No different than you're learning a new pitch or a new move on the field. As a professional, how are you sharpening your saw? How are you increasing the tools that you have in the toolbox to be able to use? And then I've had great mentors, no different than great athletes have great coaches along the way.
Welcome to the Hard Way podcast with Joe Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Races. We're teaching you how to overcome your obstacles in your life the same way we teach our 10 million plus Spartans to overcome obstacles on the course. With insight from the smartest, most accomplished experts from every corner of the world. Get ready to elevate your life today.
Joe Sena here, CEO and founder of Spartan and the Hard Way podcast. And I've got Pete Frintzilas on, who's a CEO, comes from the tech industry, 20 years of experience. And we are going to explore how you go from scruffy little kid to being CEO of a company that has, 25 million registered users?
Over 25 million registered users, and 2 million of which are using the platform on a daily basis.
It's unbelievable. Where'd you grow up?
In Long Island, New York, out in a very blue-collar town in Suffolk County. So there's Manhattan, there's Nassau, and then there's the whole area you drive through, when people know about the Hamptons. And I lived out there, lots of fields to play on.
No, I know it well. I grew up in Queens, so just the beginning of Long Island. I used to clean swimming pools, so I'd go all the way from Brooklyn all the way out to the Hamptons. So once you said Long Island, then it made sense to me, right? And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, 43. Just turned 43 2 months ago.
There were still probably some payphones around when you were growing up.
There were a lot of payphones, man. I had a pager before I had a cell phone. I was born in '81, so it's kind of that transition period. We grew up with Walkmans and Discmans, and then eventually went on to the iPhone.
And you always, parents stayed together, or what? Describe childhood.
Yeah, no, parents are still together, man. I'm the firstborn of an immigrant from Greece. My dad grew up in what I would consider at the time borderline kind of third world village down in the southeastern coastline of Greece, 2-room stone house with he was one of 6 siblings, and got on a cruise ship when he was 15, scrubbing deck floors and cleaning, and worked on the ship for 3-4 years. And, one day decided he was going to stay in the States and got off in Brooklyn, lived in the basement of a Chuck E. Cheese for a number of years as he taught himself English, listened to the Mets and Yankees radio was one of the ways he learned English. And, I grew up in a very hardworking household, right? My dad was working 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day. And, my mom was waitressing and eventually go off and work at the IRS. But they're still together. I had a younger sister, about 5 years younger than I was. But, hard work and, work ethic and commitment to family was something that was instilled with me at a very young age. You don't always understand it or, grasp what's actually happening. At times I was more frustrated my dad couldn't be at the game or take me to practice. But, looking back and kind of where we started in my early life to, the opportunity that my parents were able to provide to me, you get it later in life, really. And I look back and I know that that's something that's really shaped the person I've become.
It's interesting because you wonder if he had done incredibly well and had a huge house, right? He won the lottery or whatever. Does he instill that 15-hour a day work ethic in you, right? Because you've seen it in Long Island. I saw it in Queens. Those families that did really well, the kids did not turn out so well because they were given everything.
Hey, look, man, I'm 43 years old. I'm a CEO of a private equity owned company right now. I've worked my tail off during my career to get where I am, but I've got 3 young boys, and that's a question that's top of mind for me and my wife at all times, right? How do you navigate through getting them enough to give them the opportunity, but not giving them too much where, they think it's natural and they don't understand that you got to go work and get there. Now, they're only 6'4" and a year and a half, so I've got some time to try to navigate through this. But, Joe, I'll tell you, it's very, very top of mind for me, given my upbringing and, now in the community that I live in, where we are in our life.
I will tell you, I'll give you some tips because I'm a little ahead of you with 4 kids. We've got to create obstacles. We've got to make it tough on the kids because you don't want to end up like those kids that were spoiled and got everything. But I optimized for some of the wrong things. I optimized for how many ski runs we were going to do, right? Like get up early, get out on the mountain before everybody gets tons of ski runs in.
Yeah.
We optimized for getting a lot of it in. And when I think back, really what I should have been focused on is, did you get your own boots organized for the morning? And even if we were late, like who cares, right? Like, can you go pay for your own lift ticket? Can you read the map and find your way around the mountain? At least looking at the kids now, 80% of it is perfect. I'm not saying, I'm not patting myself, I'm not saying that, but 20% of it is, gee, I could have done better in some of these other areas.
Did they share that with you? Like now, how old are your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
I've got an 18-year-old boy, a 16-year-old boy, a 15-year-old girl, and an 11-year-old girl. And no, they don't share that necessarily. But when I think about my youngest, our youngest, she's a killer because she got the least amount of attention.
Interesting.
We never paid, like we sometimes forgot her. We weren't like worried about the bottle being dirty that she was like. And so it's interesting, right? Because it's almost counterintuitive that the youngest that gets the least amount might be the most resilient.
Just an individual in and of themselves, right? And being able to show that strength and being more resilient or being more kind of self-sufficient overall. I mean, I see it with my second, right? My second is, you either say he's the middle child or like he's already got that fortitude because he's just getting pressed by his older brother, or he wants to compete, or he wants the attention. And, even at a young age with 6 and 4, I'm already starting to see this just huge deviation of their personalities. And, and my oldest is just incredibly smart. I'm just like, oh man, like you're going to have to put in the work at some point here, dude. Like it's not all going to come easy.
There's no doubt about it. Our oldest as well is definitely focused on the books, and the younger one, it'd be an interesting study on, your company you're running, TeamSnap, to take a look at all the kids, and you could probably get some really cool information around the second, third, fourth child and how they develop and give insights to parents. The thing is, like, think about your first. When your first was born, same with me, you are overparenting.
Oh, 100%. And it's also like, hey, everything we can give, you're going to give, and you overcompensate and like, oh, maybe there's something better, or is this a better product, or should we do this service, or blah, blah, blah. And the other thing is like, you get caught up in it, man, right? Like you get caught up in the community that you're in. And, we had a bunch of friends that were all having children around the same time. We were in Manhattan at the time when we had our first and early in our second, but you get caught up in it. And it starts to blind you a little bit on just like, this isn't, larger percentage of the world are not raising their kids in this way, right? And so how do you try to balance that? And you've had an incredible career, and it sounds like you and I have had some very similar kind of upbringings and learnings. I'm sure you were navigating through that early on as well.
Yeah, I mean, think about your dad, right? Your dad is who he is, and he raised some great kids because he had it tough, because he faced obstacles. And so, I go back to the obstacle is the way. What do you learn? You're running this company. You somehow navigated life that you ended up getting handpicked to be the CEO of this monster. What are some of the things that are going on now running this company? Easy, hard, challenging, what?
Oh, I think it's always, if it's easy, you're not doing the right thing, or you're getting complacent where you are, and you're likely not going to be in your role for very long, right? So I think there's always a challenge, whether things are going well or things are going poorly. It is what the next challenge is, right? And I think as a CEO, if you're not thinking about what the next or the second or the third challenge ahead is going to be, you're not doing your job, right? And that's a combination of, the balance between day-to-day execution, operational discipline of the organization. How do you make this company run? We've got over 230 employees now. When I stepped into the role about 3 years ago, we had about 90. So, good growth along the way. We've more than doubled both in revenue and headcount along that. But we laid out a 5-7 year vision 3 years ago that we've been executing on. But you also got to continue to look forward, right? How does that vision continue to evolve, continue to shift? You made a comment there about handpicked. I'd like to say I was eventually picked, but you got to work. You put in the hard work so that when that opportunity does afford itself, no different than if you're on the sideline and you're the next one up because somebody else got hurt. The next point in which there's a CEO opening, you've done the work to put yourself in that position, right? Both with the people that you're going to go work for and the credibility and the trust that you've built up, but also your peer group, right? And that there's an understanding of why you're the one stepping out of that role.
No, when you said you came in and weren't the founder and you became CEO, I've always started my own business. And in some ways I'd say that's easier because I'm choosing the business to get into.
Yeah.
I put up some capital. It's in some ways it's harder because you had to prove yourself all along the way to a point where somebody actually would pick you. You had to stand out amongst how many people?
Yeah, and look, I think twofold, right? Because I was in that context absolutely selected by the private equity firm that I was a part of for about 18 months. I did have the good fortune and given the focus of how the PE firm, they're called Watt Capital, they're out of Chicago, they put a premium on executive leadership and that the executive leaders are embedded in with the investment team. And I, as the operator, the software leader, am able to kind of really shift and influence the thesis on where we go invest, right? Versus being handed almost like a playbook or, okay, here's the company, go run it. It was kind of ground up. Hey, we want to go invest in vertical software. That's a $3 trillion market. Great. Like, how do we start to narrow that down? And what are the attributes of markets and companies and things we're looking for? But prior to that, look, it was two things, man. I don't think it's rocket science. It's hard work, right? Every day, one of my mentors, former leaders, former CEO would say, how do you sharpen the saw every single day? No different than you're learning a new pitch or a new move on the field. As a professional, how are you sharpening your saw? How are you increasing the tools that you have in the toolbox to be able to use? And then I've had great mentors, no different than great athletes have great coaches along the way. Like, I think there is a direct correlation. You want to talk about kind of the data points of, look, great athletes have great coaches, right? That is the single point that is going to determine your experience as a young athlete and as an athlete that continues to grow is what type of coaching you have. I think it's the same thing in the professional, in a community and world outside of where if you're starting something on your own, right? I mean, if you're going to come up, and I've come up more through a corporate, career path, you need great leaders and you got to be able to work hard to show to those leaders that you're worth their time. And when you do that and you get that level of mentorship and you prove yourself and you continue to prove yourself, that continues to really open up doors and open up opportunities that are afforded to you.
I tell my kids, I say, you want to be successful, it's three things. I said, number one, you've got to be an incredible communicator. Because you're always selling. You're selling to your spouse. You're selling to your kids. We're always selling.
Yep.
Number two, I said, you've got to work like an immigrant, like your dad, right? You got to outwork everybody around you. It's probably politically incorrect to say it, but just work hard.
Yeah.
And then number three, I said, you got to have gratitude like a monk. Like, you've just got to appreciate. People say to me all the time, how was your flight? I say, well, it landed. How's your day? Well, I'm alive. Like, I'm just grateful. Like, I'm doing a podcast with you, right? So I don't know. Did I miss something? Is that the secret?
No, look, I think the second one there is the one that I've always held on to, right? Like, I knew the one thing I could control early in my career was, am I the first one in the office? Am I the last one to leave, right? I can turn on the lights. I can turn them off. I knew we were going to be out late the night before. You want to say not politically correct. Like, you're out with the boys, you're up with the men. You know what I mean? Like, I knew I was going to be in the office the next morning on time, if not early, bringing in the breakfast, bringing in the coffees to show everybody, like, I'm here and I'm committed to this career. And that continues to move forward, right? You start just on, okay, I can control the work ethic. I control the time that I can put in. Well, how do I control what else I'm doing outside of my day-to-day job to make myself better and to continue to push forward, right? And I think the gratitude piece is a really important one that's overlooked, right? At least I overlooked it, I will say admittedly, early on in my career because, I felt like I could control things and until we really recognize that I'm not going anywhere without a great team around me and my understanding my role and contribution to that team and being grateful for being on that team and to have the trust of the people around you, you're not going anywhere. Right. Unless you're maybe a hotshot individual engineer. But even in that case, man, I mean, you're a top sales rep, top engineer. Unless you're part of the team, you're part of the vision, you're part of the company, you eventually become a cancer. You're not a leader. And I think a recognition of that, it took time for me, right? It took time for me to recognize that a lot of what I learned playing football, playing baseball as a young athlete through high school, those were some of the same values that I actually needed to apply to my next stage of my professional career and kind of that bridge.
What do you wish you got right that you got wrong? Like outside of maybe not having that gratitude early in your career, what tip would you give us? You say, shit, I did that wrong.
I wish I started getting serious about my career earlier. I enjoyed my 20s. Lived in Manhattan. Like, I worked hard, but relative to, okay, I got to start setting my career path. I got to start putting in the work so that, I say, hey, everybody's got their own personal chessboard, right? How do I learn the next chess move? How do I go to fill in those different boxes that I haven't been on before? That switched and flipped for me until I was 28, 29, 30, right? And, looking back, I have great memories, great friends, great experiences. But that was lost time, right? That was lost time. And that'd be the one thing if I could go back and maybe not start right after high school, but maybe 5 years earlier.
I met a customer of Spartans in a tiny little hotel gym in New Hampshire one day. He was a wounded vet, and we met for a minute. Mr. Sena, and he'd done Spartan, and he gave me a saying that I had never thought of, but I clearly have expressed it through the brand. He said, "Save the fun for later."
Yeah.
What a great sentence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
My wife will say, "Well, when do we get to have fun?"
my wife's asking the same thing. So let's get them together. Look, there's a bit of an addiction to it too, man. Right? Like once the pieces start to come together, as I'm sure you saw early on with Spartan, like as soon as the pieces start to come together and that flywheel starts to move, and you're like, all right, I've figured this out. You want more of it. Right. And I want to continue to build the team that's going to be with me on this journey for a while, because I'm still very young. And I think I've got a lot of gasoline in the engine to continue to push forward.
Well, I love it. How do people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best place, Peter Frintzilas, or off of TeamSnap.com. You can link out to my email or to my LinkedIn. For any of your listeners that are part of our community, always welcome the feedback, whether it's product feedback, what we could be doing better as a service. And I think that's the only way as an organization we could get better, is to listen to our community, and would always welcome the feedback.
I love it. When's the Peter Frintzilas book coming?
Oh, I've got a couple more runs in me, man, before I start to hang up the quote unquote cleats and break out the pen. But eventually I want to share all my stories for sure.
You're awesome. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely, Joe. Thanks for having me. It's a great discussion.